Connor McMichael getting in reps at center at practice.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the SiriusXM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. I would love to talk Capitals hockey with you one-on-one, and we can do that on subtext. Just check the show description for more details. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for more details. In today's episode of Locked On Capitals, we talk about how Connor McMichael and Nicklas Backstrom were alternating in at the center position at practice today. Ultimately, what is behind that and what can we expect going forward? We'll talk about that in the show. A little bit later, we will talk about neck protection equipment in light of the injury that took place. Should the NHL mandate neck protection equipment? We'll talk about that. And then a little bit later, we will talk about the week ahead as the Capitals take on the Islanders and the Blue Jackets. But just to get it going here, we will talk about Connor McMichael getting some action in at the center position. And ultimately, I like it. I think it's the right idea. That is his native position. Listen, I know he has made the most of the situation that he's been dealt, and that speaks volumes of him. If it wasn't about him getting sent down to AHL and helping the Hershey Bears win the Calder Cup last season, it's this year playing on the big team and playing on the wing, even though that's not his native position. Always a guy that makes the most of his opportunities. But with that said, I'm glad that he's had a good attitude and he's made the most of the situations that he's been dealt. But with that said, I would really like to see a nice long look for Connor McMichael at the center position. I think he will excel. And like Spencer Carberry said, that's where he's going to end up at some point, kind of cryptically. And why do I say cryptically is we take a look at Nick Backstrom. And I know what he means to this team before I hear anything on Twitter or YouTube or wherever else. I get all that. He helped, assist on more Alex Ovechkin goals than anyone else. I hear all that. I know that he was a big piece with the Capitals winning the Stanley Cup in 2018. He was big there and he was part of all that. But it's a league and it's a sport of what have you done for me lately? And if we take a look at the score sheet for Nick Backstrom, last game, it was all zeros across the whole thing. And not to make this about Nick Backstrom, I don't want to, diminish what Connor McMichael has done here, but just let's take a look at the score sheet for Nick Backstrom this season. And I get that it's early in the season, but in 8 games played thus far, he has 0 goals and 1 assist. The Capitals are paying Nick Backstrom a substantial amount of money to be a third-line center, and not just a third-line center, but a center that is not getting production as of yet. And I know the big thing that was said is he played hockey in the offseason over in Sweden, and he came into camp looking in good shape, and I do think he looks like he was in good shape. He's just not getting that kind of production. Who's in front of him? Kuzi's generally the second-line center. Dylan Strome, who has just been lights out all season, has been the first-line center. So it is almost kind of like an odd man thing out. So I think that ultimately the Capitals want to see what they have in Connor McMichael at the center position. They are going to have a difficult come to Jesus moment here at some point and say, Nick Backstrom, you are a legend and you are probably a future Hall of Famer, and we love all of your contributions that you've made for this team, but we want to get a look at Connor McMichael at the center position. And not to say that, if they do that, that is going to be, casting aside Nick Backstrom. I just think it's a worthwhile thing to see. And I think that ultimately, not to even get too far ahead of ourselves, there is not a game to be played until Thursday evening. I just think they want to see what it looks like. But in my mind, that's what I'm thinking. At some point, it's what have you done for me lately, Nick Backstrom, and can Connor McMichael be a better option? Let's face it, that they're paying Nick Backstrom a boatload of money to be a third line center that is getting little to no production thus far. That's a tough thing for the Capitals. So I definitely think it is a worthwhile thing to see what Connor McMichael has in the tank on the big team. Connor McMichael, who left playing, was left wing in the team's first 8 games, lined up at the center position on the third line. There he split drill reps with Nick Backstrom. Again, worthwhile seeing with Sonny Milano returning following an illness over the weekend, and Hendrik Slapierre still up with the big club and centering the fourth line. The 22-year-old exchanged reps with Nick Backstrom. So that is kind of what they're saying, is that just with Sonny Milano in, they're just trying to alternate things up there a little bit. I get all of that, but I still think it's worthwhile to see how he can perform. And what would it hurt to give him a nice long look at the center position in real games? I know it's good to see what he has in the tank in practice. I want to see what Connor McMichael has at the center position in real game situations. He has killed it thus far. I have no reason to believe that he won't in the regular season. When asked about the move, Carbs didn't mention Backstrom. He says, I think we just always envision Connor will play there at some point, Carberry says, whether that's next game, 10 games next season. He is a natural centerman. We've liked what he's looked like on the left side this year. He's had a lot of success on the left side, but I think it's important for him to stay with that, whether it's face-off wise or breakout routes. And if we take a look at it, you don't have to look into too much. Dylan Strome isn't going anywhere. Evgeny Kuznetsov, I guess, potentially, and Nick Dowd isn't going anywhere when he comes back. So the odd man out for me right now, I hate to say it, is going to be Nick Backstrom at some point. Again, you could make the argument that it could be Evgeny Kuznetsov as well. He's had a bit of a so-so season so far. Again, we're really early in the season, and I get all that, but it's coming to terms with something that you don't want to face. You know what I mean? And it's a difficult thing. And, just based on what Nick's done for this team, and he might turn it around and just be on fire. But what we've seen thus far, that has been not the case. He's done a really good job on the walls and working at the winger specific stuff, but he also needs to stay sharp when the time comes for when we do need him to play the middle. That's his natural position, and I'm sure we find him back there at some point. I think, Spencer Carberry is pretty much just coming out and saying it without saying it. I'm going to tell you here, guys, what this means. Get up close to the headphones here. This is what I'm going to tell you. That he is going to be the future, and he's going to replace Nick Backstrom at some point. And I know that their heads are going to pop when they hear that, but that is actuality. Spencer Carberry is the head coach of this team, and he pretty much said it without saying it. The only exception to that would be Kuznetsov. So, but for me right now, Backstrom just has not been old Backstrom. Why? Because I still don't think he is 100% one. And number two, he's older. He's not the same player. Take a look at Alex Ovechkin. He's off to a slow start as well. So it's a difficult thing. It's something, I think Capitals fans, I think it's something that Brian McClellan and Spencer Carberry and his fellow teammates need to face. So we take a look at it through 8 games this season. McMichael has 2 goals and assists for 3 points. Not exactly blowing it up out there. McMichael ranks 3rd in shot attempts, 14.1, 2nd in expected goals, 0.94, 3rd in scoring chances, 9.4, and 2nd in high danger chances, 4.7. That was an assessment there by RMNB. They had some stats on that. So, pretty good, all things considered. Again, his stuff that you see there isn't just blowing up, Connor McMichael, that is, but I still think that he is one of the top players on the team, not the best. We know who the best of the best on the team is, but he has room for growth. but he still is, for me, the future at the center. And I think at some point, like I said, it's going to be a replacement for Nick Backstrom. And Mac mentioned him in the preseason. He says, I think he's ready. He's probably going to start off in different positions. He might be playing wing to start, but eventually we're going to get him at center at some point. I don't know the time frame on it. He had a good last year. Really happy about his progress. And if we want to circle back there a little bit, talking about Spencer Carberry, is that we want to get a look at him at some point. At some point, that is going to be his job. And of course, they're not going to put a timetable on it. But for me, it's going to happen sooner or later. Either Nick Backstrom turns his career around, his season around, or I don't know what that means. Are they going to bench someone like a Nick Backstrom or potentially like a Kuznetsov, considering how much they pay them? I don't know. But for me, I think that it's a worthwhile thing. And I know a lot of times you won't hear this from a lot of the beat writers on the Capitals, because I hate to say it, most of the beat writers for the Capitals are now employed by the Capitals. Monumental. Just look into that. I mean, does anyone else not find that a little bit funny that there are very few beat writers for the team right now that are not employed by the Capitals? Monumental, who's owned by the Capitals. I'm just going to leave it at that. I just, that kind of is kind of bewildering to me. I know it's not an unheard of thing. There's other teams that do that, but anyway, you're not going to always hear the straight truth from a lot of different people, even the players that or the beat writers that cover this team. I'm just telling you what I see, and it is a bit of an interesting thing out there. So for me, as a guy that covers this team, that's what I see. I see at some point Connor McMichael replacing Nick Backstrom. Again, when, I can't put a timetable on it, but I'm going to say that if he continues, Nick Backstrom, that is, on this current trajectory, I don't see his future being too bright with this team. And I don't know how that will play out, but it's going to be interesting to see if he doesn't turn his season around, how that's going to play out. All right, so coming up here after the break, we will talk about neck protection and TJ Oshie's company, Warroad, how they sold out of the neck protective equipment in light of an injury, in a death of a hockey player, and what that means going forward. I'll talk about that straight ahead. When you're drafting your fantasy team, you do whatever you wish you could do the same thing with your business team. If you're building a roster to win the league, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you can do it all with Indeed. Find top talent with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. Hate waiting. Indeed's U.S. data shows over 80% of Indeed employees find quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor the ad. Indeed knows when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. That's why you need Indeed. You only pay for quality applications that have your must-have requirements. So, visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring now. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application. Pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure and subscribe or follow Locked On Capitals wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube. I have a lot of great guests lined up, not to mention game breakdowns and all of that. So make sure and subscribe or follow Locked On Capitals today. All right, in this next segment here, we are going to talk about a tough issue, the neck protection equipment, and all. Why is this even being spoke about? This is ultimately because of Adam Johnson, who was cut in the neck by an opposing player's skate while playing for the Nottingham Panthers of the EIHL. Johnson's tragic death was sparked discourse at all levels on the sport on whether players should adopt neck protection moving forward, writes RMNB. And it's a tough thing going forward. We've seen different things during the NHL, different safety equipment that's been implemented. When they had the pads that were put, or the protection on the back of the skate to help protect from cutting your Achilles heel. I think that ultimately, if you can add any kind of protection equipment to help save a player from a situation like that, that would be great. And one of the players that's kind of at the forefront of this is TJ Oshie, as he owns a company called War Road that has equipment like that will help protect players from situations such as that. So it actually has done so well that he sold out of that equipment. Adam Johnson, like I said, was cut in the neck by an opposing player's skate. Should the NHL adapt neck protection equipment? Capitals winger TJ Oshie and his company War Road sell and have previously advocated for cut-resistant gear. He doesn't wear it himself, even though after this he said that he is also considering wearing it. And it only makes sense, and I think to a certain extent you don't need to implement safety equipment just because it happened to one player. But with that said, it was a major thing that happened to that player. So if you could save a life or save a player from a substantial injury, I think it's a good idea. Oshie told the Associated Press's Stephen Wino that about 100 players had reached out to him so far to inquire about cut-resistant gear. Neck protection is not currently mandated by the NHL or AHL, though it is required in both the OHL and the QMJHL Canadian Junior Leagues. The AHL had said that they were considering making it mandatory as well. They're looking into it. Again, if you can save a player's life, whether it's an NHL player, whether it's an AHL, a beer leaguer, a small kid that's playing hockey for the first time, then I think it makes sense. We've learned a lot in our lifetime about safety. I'm old enough to remember when there weren't seatbelts, necessary in cars. It was just one strap that went across your lap. And I remember there being no bike helmets. I spent my whole life growing up not wearing a bike helmet, and a good chunk of my life never wearing a seatbelt. That's just the way it was in the 70s and 80s. But, things have changed and we've gotten smarter. And I think to a certain extent, sometimes old people say, well, it's good enough for me back then. Why do they need it now? But with that said, we know better. We know better. I mean, so it's to kind of stick your head in the sand and just be totally crazy to say, well, I didn't need it, so why did they need it? I think that if there are new advances in safety equipment, then I think that we should use it. I mean, you got to think that Adam Johnson wishes that he was wearing something like that to avoid an injury like that. So I think that, again, if there's anything that you can do to help save a life, either or for a life or a major injury, then I think you should do that. So subsequently to this, War Road, the company owned by TJ Oshie, was sold out by Monday afternoon. It's just crazy sad we don't have anything like that. Oshie told Wino, we're thinking about his family first. We'll try to get as many products out there as we can for people. The EIHL, which plans to return to play this weekend, will soon require neck protection for all players. And sometimes it's something like this that there's growth and changes that need to be made. Of course, it's unfortunate that had to happen. But if we can take anything positive away from this, is that maybe we can implement something like that. If you just take a look at, I'm going to say that the NHL and hockey kind of in general is kind of behind the times when it comes to safety equipment. I would say that the NFL kind of is at the forefront of it. And what am I talking about? Let's just talk, I'll get a little bit closer to home. It wasn't a death, but take a look at Carl Hagelin, who, thought that he lost his vision in his eye forever. And his vision is still not 100%. He has issues with depth perception and had to retire from the NHL because of it. It wasn't in a game. It was a fluke accident at a practice where a Capitals player was swinging wildly and came up and hit him right in the eye. He was screaming in pain, and some seasoned NHL players said that they've never heard a guy scream like that before. He said that he had hoped that he hit under his eye or above his eye, but it hit him square in the eye. So what I'm trying to say here is that if he had proper equipment, I'm going to go ahead and say it, that little clear visor that they have up front is not cutting the mustard. It's just really not. If you take a look at college, they have it right. And I know that it's not always the most pleasing thing aesthetically to see a chain link fence over the front of a guy's face. But if it's going to save someone from injury, then who really cares? And it wasn't that long ago that even that clear visor in front, that was optional. So I think that the NHL needs to be at the forefront of this and protect their players, similar to the same way that the NFL has stepped up and done the same thing. Because you hate to see it on a lot of different levels. You hate to see the injury. You hate to see any deaths, of course, because of this. But it's not just the big name guys. It's all the guys underneath and the children that play this. So I think that just hockey in general as a whole should do it, but the NHL should be at the forefront. Said it is the biggest league, the biggest hockey league out there. So I think it only makes sense and good on TG Oshie and his company Warroad for kind of spearheading and having this. I'm sure maybe there's other companies out there that offer similar equipment. I guess I don't know, but I am familiar with the Warroad company just based on the fact that TG Oshie plays for the Capitals. And Warroad is where he's from, and Warroad is a city in Minnesota, which is where I reside. So I get all that. That adds up to me. But again, I think that makes sense that if there is any kind of safety equipment that they could use out there to help protect a player, that's what they should do. All right, so coming up here after the break, we will talk about the week ahead. We're talking about the Thursday night game against the Islanders and the weekend game against the Columbus Blue Jackets. What do the Capitals have to do to continue in their winning ways? I'll talk about that straight ahead. A new NHL season brings all sorts of possibilities. Alex Ovechkin could score 50 goals. The Caps could hoist the Stanley Cup, and you could be a big winner by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. So the biggest thing here, sometimes you're watching a game, maybe you're not that into it. If you're into fantasy hockey, if you're betting on hockey, if you have a little bit of money on it, it makes watching the games that much more exciting. To win a 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Capitals fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks, and you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL, and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's Locked On NHL. See Sleeper's terms of use of details and locational availability. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Capitals keep rolling, they keep winning. What do they have to do to keep winning? Well, they just got to continue to keep doing what they're doing well. Hopefully, we see Dylan Strome engaged in continuing to score a lot of great goals. Right now, he is knocking it out of the park and the leader on this team in offensive horsepower, if you will. But we want to see scoring not just from players like Dylan Strome. We want to see it by other players on the team that have historically scored a lot of goals. Take a look at Alex Ovechkin. He's been a bit snake bitten. You take a look at Tom Wilson, who has, a couple last goals in the last couple of games here, but we need production up and down. We could also used to see it from a lot of different players that have been kind of absent from the score sheet. I talked about in the first segment from Nick Backstrom. We could see more from Evgeny Kuznetsov, that kind of thing. Those we need more scoring up and down the lineup. It cannot be Dylan Strome and Tom Wilson carrying the bulk of the mail in the scoring department. And don't get me wrong, I know that the scoring is going to come from Alex Ovechkin at some point, but I think to a certain extent that perhaps he's almost a little bit too caught up in his head thinking about the Gretzky thing. Subconsciously, I don't think he's making a concerted effort to think about Gretzky. I think that, if you don't score goals and you're snake bitten for a period of time, I think that you overthink things, kind of like Anthony Mantha did last season. Look at when he's kind of freed his mind up and he's getting more production, and all of a sudden he's bumping up the lineup. A guy that was talked about being traded at one moment is actually a guy that is one of the better pieces on the team right now, Anthony Mantha. Can you believe that I'm talking about Anthony Mantha being one of the bigger pieces on the Capitals right now? Again, a work in progress. I'm not anointing him as one of the best players on the team, but he's definitely getting a whole lot more contributions than he used to, and a whole lot more than a lot of players are this year. That's what we need. And I got to believe that Anthony Mantha will continue to grow. If he continues to play like how he's played here within the last handful of games here, I think that, the sky's the limit. I think that there's a mandate on him. This is a contract year for him where either this is his last year in Washington, and then he's going to have an opportunity to sign somewhere else, or, maybe the Capitals will re-sign him. I really don't think that's going to be the case. Even if he had a really good season, I just don't think that's going to be the case. But that's what we need, is production up and down. And we also need a healthy lineup. Nick Dowd has been out, and we don't know exactly when he's going to come back. Charlie Lindgren on the injury list again, even though I heard that he is potentially going to be good to go on Thursday. But we're already facing, a fair amount of injury thus far, not to mention Max Pacioretty, who we have not seen yet, and Joel Edmondson we've only seen in the preseason. We still don't know the true identity of this team. That identity will be known after the full lineup is on the ice. Once we see Pacioretty and Joel Edmondson and just get in the lay of the land, then we can kind of make a prediction on what a kind of team this team is going to be. But taking a look at the games ahead, like I said, they take on the Islanders next, and the Islanders have lost one. They are sitting in 4th place in the Metro, one ahead of the Capitals, who are in 5th place, winners of 3 in a row. Wouldn't that be some kind of swagger, something to really kind of brush your shoulders off on if they could knock off the Islanders? That would be a pretty good thing there, since they are in the Metro Division. And then this weekend's game is against the Blue Jackets, losers of 4 in a row. They currently sit in 7th in the Metro Division. But it's one of the things that's interesting is that, you never want to fall into a trap game. You never want to go into a situation and think to yourself, I'm playing the Blue Jackets. I can pretty much mail this in and I'm going to win the game. That's when disaster will strike. So Capitals, keeping to the script, what has, been made them successful thus far, keep rolling with that and good things will follow. Take a look at the Sharks. Exactly what I'm talking about. They could have went into that game. That could have easily been a trap game for the Capitals. It wasn't. And they ultimately ended up winning the game. And that's what's big. And sometimes best laid plans go to rest. As I look at the Metro Division standings right now, the Penguins are in last place. Who saw that? Who saw that? The experts, the insiders said that they might lead the Metro Division, or at least be within the first 3 places there. Right now, it's the Rangers, Hurricanes, and Devils, and the Penguins all the way on the bottom. Now, looking at the Capitals, they are in 5th place in the Metro. They still have a lot of work to do. Again, it's still early in the season, but making steps in the right direction. Winners of 3 in a row. That's a heck of a lot better than the Blue Jackets, who are the losers of 4 in a row. So that's what the Capitals have to do, is keep with the winning. But if you take a look at one of the best winning streaks, it is the best actually, is the Rangers, winners of 5. Isn't it interesting? The former coach of the Capitals, Peter Laviolette, is now the head coach of the Rangers, and they've won 5 in a row. Hey, I have no regrets about that. At the end of the day, I think that the Capitals moving on to Spencer Carberry was the right thing to do. But it's interesting that Peter Laviolette is having success. So all the naysayers that said he was a horrible coach and all that kind of stuff ultimately didn't know what they were talking about, as he is getting results in the Big Apple. All right, listen, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Washington Capitals. And I have all of you to thank, all of you that listen on the audio side and on YouTube. Thank you so much for listening each and every day. Are you a fan of other DC sports? Well, Locked On has got you covered. We have Locked On Nationals, Commanders, Wizards. So no matter what major DC sport it is, Locked On has got you covered. Are you a fan of the NHL at large? We have Locked On NHL available wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube. And keep it here to Locked On Capitals, as I will continue to keep you guys updated with all the news surrounding the Capitals, not to mention break down the game Thursday night between the Capitals and the Islanders. So make sure and keep it locked to Locked On Capitals, because we are locked on Capitals. We're not casual Capitals. We're Locked On Capitals here. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.